Welcome everybody. My name is Mathew Sterchi with Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes. So glad that you're joining us today. We've got 50 plus registered. I'm not sure if we'll get to that number, but that's okay. We've got people from all over the country wanting to learn more about this particular topic. Before we get into cost per square foot, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our company, a little bit about myself, and then a little bit of a preview about what we're going to go over today. So first and foremost, Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes, we are family owned and operated since 1974. We specialize in the design, fabrication, and construction of log and timber frame homes across the continental United States. We are planning to do a project up in Alaska this year, and so we go all over the place doing log and timber frame shells. I started here in 1997, worked summer jobs in the plant and out on the road in construction, and started in sales and marketing officially in 97. So I've been doing this. This is my 23rd, going on my 24th year. And so I've got a lot of experience working with clients. We do a lot of primary residences, build a lot of forever homes for clients who are looking to build that last home. We do a lot of weekend retreats for people that are wanting to build legacy houses or weekenders that they want to pass along to their kids or grandkids. So we do a little bit of everything, specialize in lakefront properties, mountain properties, farm, equestrian type properties, or just mostly rural properties. And so log and timber frame construction is our specialty. It's our love, our passion. It's what we're good at. It's what we're experts at, and it's what our entire business is designed to facilitate. So if that's what you're looking for within this presentation to learn more about that, then you've come to the right place. If you're looking for a conventional home, then we've obviously done a bad job of marketing what the event is. So I wanted to start there and talk a little bit about our history. And then I want to talk a little bit about the goals of this presentation. We're going to do a 15 to 30 minute presentation, and then the last 30 minutes or so is going to be designed for a question and answer. But the goal here is to educate you guys more about what it takes to build a log home, the cost per square foot, to try to help you determine how to derive your budget goals, and then also to help you understand and learn more about how to move forward in the steps. Because if you haven't purchased land and made improvements, and you haven't designed a plan, and you haven't gone out and done due diligence on what the cost to build are, then certainly we've got a lot of good information that we're going to be able to help you with. So with that said, I want to go over the first thing being, what does it cost to build a log or timber frame home? And that is one of, if not the most frequently asked questions, one that we certainly will spend a great deal of time addressing with our prospective clients and going through all of the variables that go along with it and the things that that come with cost per square foot. And honestly, when we get asked this question, it's a tough one, because the right answer for us, because we are a shell provider and we design, fabricate, and construct just the log and timber frame components, the right answer should really be, we don't know. So when a prospective client says to us, hey, what does it cost to build a log or timber frame home? Or what does it cost to build my log or timber frame home? The real correct answer should be, we really don't know, because we have to go through a very vigilant process to determine what that cost is, and helping guide you down the path that helps you understand more about what that cost is. But sometimes the right answer being, we don't know yet, is not the answer that our prospective clients want to hear, and it's certainly not the answer that helps them figure out if this is going to be a fit for them. So what I want to do first is kind of look at the big picture, what I'm calling in our outline a macro overview. It's kind of taking some of the bigger things. So Of the registrants that we had for this event today, we had 22 landowners and 26 non-landowners. So we've gotten our macro overview broken out into 4 basic sections: land, land improvements, home construction, and furnishings. And I'm not going to talk about furnishings, but I'm going to talk about the big 3: land, land improvements, and home construction. And so when a prospective client comes to us and says, hey, we want to build a log home, we don't own property, one of our questions to them is, what do you want to invest in the project? And when we talk about invest, meaning what's your investment goal? What's that total number going to look like? So then we can start to dissect what needs to be dedicated towards land, what needs to be dedicated towards land improvements, and then what is left over at that point to put towards the construction of the project. And then whatever's left over there would go towards furnishings, unless you're using furniture out of an existing home, which is the case a lot of times. So talking about the big 3: land, land improvements, and home construction, we're not going to talk and go into too much depth about land and land improvements, although I do want to touch on that. As you know, from different parts of the country, different locations, land costs will vary pretty dramatically, especially in East Tennessee when you're getting into waterfront properties, you're getting into mountain properties with views, or you're getting into larger acreage, equestrian or farm type properties. So be very specific when you start deciding what your investment's going to be, what your investment's goal is going to be, because you've got to start to earmark specific budget goals for each of these items. Once you determine the land, if you're one of those 22 that register that owns land, now you got to start getting a better feel for land improvements. And that will vary with each site. Real flat sites that are, in more rural areas, that are in more farm settings, where you're building the house, maybe closer to the road, where you don't have to get power as far back into the property, or you don't have to build as long of a road, or maybe you've got water already at the road and you just need to bring it into the building site, or you've got sewer. So land improvements are going to vary with each and every homeowner that's on this Lunch and Learn today. There are no 2 sites that are just alike. Everyone is slightly different. Some are going to have greater cost in land improvements, and some are going to have properties that already have utilities, that already have water, sewer, that already have power to the road, might even have gas. So there are going to be very variables and differences with each one. But I know one of the biggest reasons that you're here today is to learn more about what the construction cost is. So once we get past the land and the land improvements, now we're looking at the cost of building the home, which when you get into construction cost, we can't not overlook too much the variables in cost, starting with geographic location. And geographic location plays a huge part in cost per square foot. When you get into the southeast versus the northeast versus the northwest or the southwest, construction costs will vary all over the place. Then when you get into specific locations of those geographic areas, like in Vermont, or if you're out in the northwest and you're over in Big Sky, Montana, or you're in Jackson Hole, you can get certain pockets where supply and demand and that cost per square foot is going to be typically higher than what you would find in a national average. So geographic location plays a big part. Site conditions, as you see in the outline, play a huge part. The slope of the property, a steep site versus a level site is going to be very different in construction cost, in excavating and grading and foundation cost. And so those are going to be variables that will sway your cost per square foot. And then engineering requirements. Let's just take the Southeast, for example. In East Tennessee, typically your builds aren't in real high altitudes. When you get over into Western North Carolina, we can get into some 4,000, 4,500, 5,000 foot altitudes, and your wind speeds will change, your snow load requirements will change, your energy code requirements will change, and that will affect the cost per square foot. So if you're in one of those areas where maybe you're in a coastal area building down in Florida, or you're in a high altitude in Colorado building in Steamboat, or up at a 8 or 9 or 10,000 foot altitude, certainly your cost per square foot will be different than somebody that's building in a valley in a real open setting, nice flat level site with not a whole lot of infrastructure cost associated. So those are all the variables. What we tend to say to clients as our normal disclaimer is cost per square foot will vary dramatically with who your general contractor is, where you're building in the country, the geographic location, the site conditions, the site slope, and engineering and structural and energy code requirements that are associated. And then the big one that I did not overlook, that I wanted to save for last, is your finishes. The finishes will ultimately drive what that cost per square foot is. We've had clients that have done, very good quality finishes, but not super high end, and have been able to value engineer with doing things like shingle roofs and just a nice pre-finished 3-inch oak flooring, or doing some type of just middle of the road cabinetry and countertop, versus somebody that's doing super high-end finishes and fixtures and doing the stone-coated metal shakes on the roof and doing all these other things that tend to drive that cost per square foot. And that's, in essence, the reason it's so hard to answer this question specifically. We have no intentions of talking to a prospective client and setting them up to fail. Our job and our goal is to help guide our prospective clients down the path towards building the home of their dreams. And that question that we get asked a lot, what does it cost to build a log or timber frame home, is one of those that's so tough to answer. So let's dive into what affects the cost per square foot of a log home. And then I'm going to give you guys some national averages that we tend to use with our prospective clients. And so I'm going to get out of my screen here. If everybody hopefully can see my screen. Dawn, can you still see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to go into, this is a new appraising log homes brochure that is actually available through the Log Homes Council, which is a part of the National Association of Home Builders. And so I took this off of their website, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but with any home, not just a log or a timber frame home, but with a custom home, your cost per square foot will vary dramatically based on those finishes. And typically with a custom home, like a log or timber frame home, which is a custom home in its truest essence, in its truest form, those costs will be directly dependent on those variables that I mentioned: location, site conditions, GC, and especially finishes. And so one of the things that you typically see in a log home is you're going to see things that are included like open beam ceilings, cathedral ceilings, wood flooring, wood covering, granite countertops. You're not a lot of times going to see drywall or carpet. You're not going to see shingle roofs as much, although a lot of our clients do them, but a lot of our clients want the metal roof or the stone-coated metal shake. They want the masonry fireplace or the prefab masonry fireplace. They don't do the metal inserts as much. And all of those things that you see here where it says these include are all things that drive that cost typically up in the construction of any home. That is not just a log or timber frame home, but any home. And so especially with a log or timber frame home where you're doing log walls and you're doing timber floor systems, or with a timber frame, you're doing a true timber frame shell, and then you're putting structural insulation panels around it, you're wanting to complement those things. Especially with a log home, you want to complement those log walls with nice wood finishes and nice roofing choices like metal and slate and those types of things. You want to do a lot of covered porches and do the covered porches with a lot of timber components. And all those things have ultimately an effect on that cost per square foot and make it really difficult to say and pinpoint what is that cost per square foot going to be? And so when we talk about the kind of macro overview, I know we're talking a lot about these variables that go along with generating and understanding what that cost per square foot is. So you can find this on the Log Homes Council site. We're going to share this with you as follow-up with the presentation, so don't feel like you've got to memorize this or go searching for it. We'll provide this for you as well. Bear with me. Let me get back to the screen that we were on. Okay. So home construction, kind of looking at the big picture, you've got three big components: the land improvements, and the home construction. And we talked about the variables. We talked about the things that go along with a log home that tend to affect cost per square foot. That's the same thing and holds true for timber framing. And then of course, furnishings, we're not going to get into that because that's owner specific, that's individual specific. Some people like nice furniture and some people, don't do it. So we won't cover that. But with regards to the next item, national averages, what we tend to do with our prospective clients is try to talk in terms of national average. And this is where it gets a little tricky sometimes because the national average up in the Northeast is different than it is in the Southeast, and so on and so on. So let's talk specifically about this log and timber home industry insight. Back in 2019, the Log and Timber Homes Council did what we call an insight, and they basically polled all of the log and timber home companies that participated in the survey. And what they were basically asking in this survey is, what was your average cost per square foot? So what we're going to talk about is first in 2018, log versus timber versus hybrid, and then we're going to go into 2019. And I want to say a couple of things with regards to log. You notice that log is pretty low, much lower than what you're seeing in hybrid and timber frame. And I'll qualify that by saying what most of your suppliers do is they provide a log wall package, and then everything beyond that for the timber, for the floor, the roof, and the porches is all conventionally framed. Obviously, it's essential in having a log home for you to have 4 log walls. And so when you get into a lot of the suppliers in this industry, they're not doing timber floors and timber roof systems and timber porches. They're doing 4 log walls, and then everything else is conventionally framed. So that number tends to be a little bit skewed because you're not getting those timber roof systems with the mortise and tenon joinery or the timber frame trusses. You're not getting those post and beam timber floors. So the number, can tend to be a little bit lower. But with that said, like in anything with custom homes, any type of home that's site built, you can value engineer and you can drive those costs up or down depending on those finishes and depending on how you build that actual home. And so we can build log homes several different ways with log walls and conventional floors and roofs, and we can build a log home with log walls and timber floor and roof systems and timber porches. And those cost per square foot for each of those projects will vary just on those specific items. So with log, you see the national average in 2018 was $137 a square foot. For timber frame, or what we would call post and beam construction, which is encapsulated in timber construction, it's $208. And then hybrid, which really is a mix of both of these. Hybrid might be frame walls with a timber floor and roof. It might be log walls with a conventional floor and roof, but your hybrid construction was about $160, $161. And then in 2019, your log construction wasn't changed much. Your timber frame construction went up pretty dramatically, and your hybrid construction went up as well. Again, I'm going to qualify this that this is not as accurate as it would be if you were adding those timber floor and roof systems in to that build. And so that is where our sales consultants will come into the picture and help with their experience. They'll help guide you through the process to learn more about what your budget goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, what finishes and features you want, and then try to help guide you on the design and the square footage and the finishes that will certainly try to help you meet that investment goal. Those are things that we will help our prospective clients do. So that is your national average. And what we typically tell prospective clients when they ask that question, and if you'll give me just a minute, I want to get back to our presentation. But what we typically tell our prospective clients when they ask the question, and we try to give them a specific answer, is that we have a lot of clients that have a very wide range of cost per square foot. Because we build all over the country, we see everything from 137 to 140 all the way up to 250 to 300 square foot above. Now, I say that not to scare anybody, because I want to be transparent and I want to be very clear about cost per square foot is going to vary with everybody. There is no two homes that are built alike, nor are they going to cost the same thing. And so, for our clients, we get a lot of people that are serving as their own GC. They're doing some sweat equity. They may be retirees that have time on their hands and they want to perform some sweat equity and do some interior framing. They're serving as their own GC, so they're foregoing that general contractor fee. And I've had that before, many cases where you see a lower cost per square foot on those clients that are doing some of that. They're doing sweat equity, or they're hiring all their subs directly and they're not using a general contractor, versus the opposite end of the spectrum, which is somebody building in a real high-end area like Highlands, North Carolina, or Aspen, Colorado, or somewhere up in Vermont, like Killington, Vermont, or a big ski area where demand is really high and supply with subs and contractors is low. So the cost per square foot, tends to go up. So what we run into is we run into these wide ranges of cost per square foot, where we want to try to help guide our clients to see if this is going to be a fit for them, but we have to give them these big ranges like 150 to 250 per square foot and everything in between. And so we try to go back. This is when we try to go back to some of these national averages to say, hey, this is what the country saw. This is what you can use to determine if this type of construction is a fit for you, because we can certainly help guide you to try to value engineer things to try to drive your number down, or if certainly you have specified a plan and finishes that fit within your budget goals, great. That's what we want, because your investment goal is our goal to try to help you build to. So we talked about the averages for log, timber frame, and hybrid, and I want to talk quickly about just the different markets. Okay, this is something that came online that I found on the NAHB, and it talks about different cities and the cost per square foot of different areas. And so this goes back and supports what I was saying earlier about different regions of the country have different cost per square footage, the Southeast versus the Northeast. So take New York City, for example. This is conventional construction. So let me be clear. This is not based on log or timber frame. This is just conventional stick and brick, site-built homes, tract homes, and you kind of see the wide variation from New York all the way down to Winston-Salem, from 185, 190 a square foot down to 100 a square foot. Now, does that mean that there aren't homes in Winston-Salem that are 200 plus a square foot? Absolutely not. There's homes all over the country that are going to be at the low end of the spectrum, at the high end of the spectrum, because it's all a function of your site, your finishes, your contractor, and what you're putting into it. But this is just using averages. So you can see the Northeast tends to be maybe a little bit higher per square foot than it does down in the South and Southeast area and region of the country. So I thought this was a helpful resource, because it kind of supports what I was saying about region of the country and how those costs per square foot will vary with those areas. So We talked about national averages. We talked about conventional homes by major cities and what those custom site-built homes typically range from region to region. Now I want to talk about some of the smaller items, some of the finer points, kind of the micro overview of how it's best to determine cost per square foot. Because one of the things I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you at the end of this presentation, is you should not use guesstimates or ballpark ranges to make decisions on whether this is a fit for you. You should always do feasibility. You should always do your due diligence and getting a plan designed and estimated specifically so you know what it's going to cost. There's two ways to kind of go about that. One is what we call, determining desired investment goal and working backwards into it. So let's say that I want to build a project and my investment goal is $500,000, and I'm just picking random numbers. And so I want to know, based on that $500,000 building budget, I want to know what kind of budgets I should specify for each line item. Meaning, how much should I designate or dedicate to foundation? How much should I designate towards cabinetry and kitchens and countertops? So this is a graph or a pie chart that shows you different percentages that get allotted towards that budget goal. So if I'm going backwards and I'm saying, okay, I want to invest 500,000. Now, how much do I need to dedicate towards appliances? How much do I need to dedicate towards cabinets and countertops, painting, drywall, if we're doing drywall, or wood finishes? How much do I need to dedicate towards the log structure? And this is where you would fall into this framing and trusses. Now, this is where it would be a different percentage, because in a log and timber frame package, you're basically replacing the framing and the conventional lumber that goes to building those structural components. And that's what we're doing, is we're doing the log walls, the timber floors, the timber roof, the timber porches. And so that percentage may look a little different within your pie chart, therefore altering the price a little bit. And that's why I was saying earlier in qualifying, when you look at the national average for log construction being relatively low, that's primarily because most of your suppliers are just providing log walls. They're not doing timber floors and timber roof systems and timber porches. So be very specific about your desires, what you want to see in the home, because your sales consultant can help guide you towards what the best package may be. It may be our essential package, which just has log walls, or it may be our premium package, which has all the timber floors and roof systems and porches. And those cost per square foot numbers will vary with each of those. So hopefully that makes some sense, because what you're doing in essence is you're saying, all right, I want to invest X amount of dollars and I need to know what each line item is going to cost or how much to dedicate. Now, what I'll say to that is, this is not the best way to decide cost per square foot or budget goal. Going back to the next one, which is purchase your land. And let's just assume that everybody has done that step and everybody's gotten some feasibility on what the land improvements will cost. So they know what that expense is. Now you're trying to determine what it's going to cost to build this home. And you're wanting to do some due diligence and feasibility. What I'll tell prospective clients every single time, the best way to determine what it's going to cost to build my home, to build my log or timber frame home, is to pick a plan, get at least a preliminary design done so that you can see floor plans with the changes you want to make and elevations with the finishes you want to have, and a foundation plan so that you can go to a foundation contractor and do your due diligence and do feasibility studies and go out and get those numbers. And that is certainly not foolproof, because there's things that change along the way, but that is the best way to determine what it's going to cost to build that home and what that cost per square foot would be. And then at that point, once you have done your due diligence and you've done your homework and you've gone out and you've picked a plan and you've gotten some design work done and you've gotten these numbers in hand, then you know where you stand with regards to your budget goal. then you know whether you need to cut some money out and you need to sit down with your sales consultant and value engineer, or if there's some room in your budget to maybe do that metal roof that you wanted, where you already estimated for shingles, but you got a little bit of room and you can add the metal roof in there. Those are things that certainly can go either way. We would love to have a scenario where a client has some room in the budget to add in some of the things that they wanted. But as I tell everybody, you've got to have a starting point. So determine what that plan is, what the changes you want to make, and what finishes you want to go into it, and get that starting point to see where you are, to see what number you land on. And so when we do our preliminary design process, for example, we start working with a client and we take them into a preliminary design phase where we do floor plans, we do elevations, we do a foundation plan, and then we make a round of revisions, and then we send that out with our good faith estimate on our log and timber components and the labor that goes into us building those components. And then we give you that good faith estimate for you to take to your contractor, for him to then go through his worksheet, which I'll share here. And again, this is just a boilerplate worksheet from a lending institution. And then you can go out and start plugging in numbers to these line items, right? What is it going to cost to do? Now let me back up a little bit and mention something. Typically, cost per square foot, when we looked at those national averages, they do not include things like land, septic, well, power, furnishings, landscaping. Your construction cost is purely the construction of the home on the property, because you're going to have those site improvement costs and you're going to have that land cost no matter what kind of home you build. And so when we talk cost per square foot, I want to make sure I mention that we're talking purely about the cost of the home, not about the improvements to the land, because you would have those costs whether you were putting a fifth wheel camper up there, or whether you're building a custom home, or whether you're putting any type of structure up there. And so this worksheet will give you kind of a baseline or some checklist items or a breakdown line items of the different things that you're going to have to go out there and secure numbers for. If you're hiring a GC, you don't have to worry about this, because the general contractor is going to have a spreadsheet similar to this, probably something more involved, and he's going to be responsible for going out and getting all those numbers for you to determine what that total cost is. If you are one of our clients that's serving as your own GC, then certainly this is going to be your responsibility to go out and get plumbing rough in, mechanical, electrical, cabinetry, countertops, etc. Now, we'll give you our number for a designed, engineered set of plans for the log and timber structure, for the walls and the floor and the roof and the porches and the labor to install that. And then at that point, you go out to your other subs to get numbers on all those other finishes. So hopefully that helps. This is something that we'll make available to you. Let me qualify by saying that this is not always exact. It's not always going to include everything that you have in there, but it's just a baseline to give you something to go by if you're certainly serving as your own GC. Because in a scenario where you're going to a lending institution is typically going to want to get a general contractor's turnkey number. They're going to want to see a set of plans, they're going to see a turnkey number, and they're going to want to vet out that turnkey number and make sure everything is included in that proposal, because that's what they're doing the loan off of. So hope that has been helpful. And in closing, what I wanted to say and what I wanted to go back and review a couple of things. As I mentioned, don't ever use ballparks or guesstimates. We certainly, a lot of times on the front end, when we start talking to a prospective client, we'll use some ranges and we'll use ballpark estimates to see if this type of project is even in the range of what they're wanting. If somebody were to call in and say, hey, we want to build a log home, and we've got a piece of land up here in Kentucky, and we want to spend X amount of dollars, and we want to build X amount of square feet, and that square footage cost per square foot number comes out to $100 a square foot. We may say, hey, that doesn't really fit within the range of what most of our typical clients build for. Most of our typical clients build for this ballpark range from here to here and everything in between. And certainly we're going to try to steer a prospective client in the right direction so that we don't waste their time and we don't set them off on a path for something that they can't achieve, because that's our goal, is to guide you down the path for something that you can achieve. The second thing is understand the variables of building cost. We've got people that have property, that were registered in Tennessee, Virginia, Florida. We've got somebody up in Vermont, Kansas, Iowa. All of those costs for each of those build projects are going to be different based on market conditions, site conditions, finishes, supply and demand out in those areas, and it varies all over the place. And so we certainly don't want to give you bad information to get you started off. We want to make sure that we set you up to succeed. The third item is make sure that if you don't have a budget goal in mind, make sure that you go and talk to your lending institution and get pre-qualified so that you know what you can comfortably afford if you're going to finance. I mean, we don't care how much money you have or what kind of car you drive. We don't care about any of that. All we want to know is what that budget goal is, because that budget goal is our goal to help you achieve, to help you meet. And then last, but certainly not least, as I mentioned before, and I don't want to be redundant, develop a plan, pick a plan, whether it's one of our standard plans or whether it's a modification to a standard plan, or if you want to scratch something out on a piece of paper or a cocktail napkin, or if you want to draw something out on a piece of graph paper. It doesn't matter how involved or how little involved it is. Just be specific about it so that we can give you some good solid numbers on our portion. At that point, you can make a set of decisions whether you wanted to invest in doing a preliminary design or getting started in our commitment phase, and then so that you can go out and get a more specific plan to determine finishes and specifications so that you can go out and get a number from a general contractor or from subs in your area on what it's going to take to build this home. We want to make sure that all of our prospective clients do that before they get too far ahead of themselves, because the last thing we'd want to see is for a prospective client or for a client to get halfway into the build or 3/4 of the way through the build and realize, uh-oh, I'm going to be short. That is not going to set you up for a successful build, for something that you're going to be happy with, and not something we would ever want to do. And so be very vigilant on the front end. Do your homework, dot your I's, cross your T's, do all your due diligence, and go through that feasibility study to determine what that cost is going to be. That is the best way to know cost per square foot. We can ballpark stuff all day long, but the best way to do it is to be specific, know your finishes, and perform your due diligence with your cost per square foot in your building project. So